All right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of my podcast, Grit Stories of Resilience. I'm happy today to introduce to you Anne Drescher, a doctoral student in the School of Psychology at UNC Chapel Hill. I have asked Anne to talk a bit about the realities of going to college for young people today, and it is a topic she knows well, as last year she developed and taught a course on mental health and wellness for undergraduate students at Carolina. But before UNC, strangely, there was a time at Duke University as an undergraduate student, teaching then early elementary school children in New Orleans, working as a research coordinator in child development lab at Tufts University. And in the spring of 2020, she went north again and graduated from the Harvard Graduate School of Education with a master's degree in human development and psychology. Now for today. Anne believes that students are often stressed, overwhelmed, socially isolated, and many times not prepared for the new experience of college. This is the beginning of a new school year, and thus, what better time than now to talk about the challenges many of our young people are facing, too often alone. And Anne, thanks for being with me today. I appreciate your doing this.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much. Let me just start off with the most general question. What's it like to be an 18 or 19-year-old going to college, small or large, private or public, at a university? What's it like for a young person to go in the first year?
I think it depends on the person. For some people, it's exciting. For others, it's overwhelming. It depends on the campus. Like you said, small, large, public, private. There are going to be a lot of differences in between students. But I think it's really important to note that we experienced a global pandemic. And so people who are starting college now spent a significant time of their high school career going to Zoom class or doing high school online. And so they were not able to have a lot of the normal social interactions that we had in high school. And so people are starting college now, and I'm sure that they're excited, but there's also probably a bit of apprehension because it might be their first time away from home. It might be their first time having to make friends in person. And so, even though it's this really exciting moment that there's a lot of build up to, it can also be pretty scary and pretty overwhelming for teenagers. I mean, I think sometimes we forget that college students are still teenagers, they're 18 most of the time. And so, even though a lot of times we treat them as adults, they are coming off of a really difficult high school experience, and we set very high expectations for them.
Who are the ones that set the high expectations? Are those their parents?
That's a great question. I think it comes from a lot of places. Absolutely, parents. And I think a lot of times that's very well meaning. Parents want the best for their kids. And so there is a lot of pressure there that comes from parents, pressure to pursue a certain major, pressure to get certain grades, even sometimes pressure to be in a certain social situation, whether that's being in quote unquote the right fraternity or sorority or having a similar experience to what their parents had. There's a lot of pressure that comes from parents. There's also a lot of academic pressure. And I think that for some kids, this could be the first time in their academic career where they might struggle. And it can be really difficult and really challenging. And so I think that there's different sources of pressure. I also think a lot of these students, a lot of the ones that I've worked with at UNC, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. They're very high achieving students. You know, we have an amazing public university in our state. Even though I went to Duke, I will say it is an amazing public university. And so these students are excellent students. They're high achieving students. And so they put a lot of pressure on themselves to keep up with that achievement, to be perfect, not only academically, but socially as well, right? I think UNC is a really good example of a school that has very high academic expectations, but there's also a ton of social pressure going on too.
Is it normal for a teenager to be homesick in those first few weeks away from home, though they never thought they would be? Is that normal?
I think so. I don't know that all of them would admit that or tell you that, but I think that a lot of them do miss home. And especially, I think a lot of them miss the social supports and the communities that they have at home. So if we think about a high school student, they have a lot of built-in support, whether that's from teachers, parents, siblings, coaches, clubs, faith communities. They have all of these places where they can go to when they need help. They have places they can go to when they want social interaction. They have all of these communities kind of built into their high school network. And when you transition to college, a lot of that goes away, right? You move into a brand new dorm, maybe with people you don't know. Maybe you're the only student who's coming from your high school or your small town. And so those social supports, they get stripped away. And that can be really, really challenging and overwhelming and isolating. And so I think a lot of those students are feeling some of that homesickness. And it might not even be homesickness for their parents or their physical home, but it might just be a sense of losing some of that community that they have back at home.
So how if a kid is, as you say, challenged, either not academically at first, because the first week or two they're just excited to be perhaps on campus. They're not yet worried about papers or quizzes or that sort of thing, and they got more free time than they had before in high school because it's not quite as structured. How does a person adapt to the social changes? How does a person meet other people and make friends and get acquainted with people? How does that work?
I think it's really challenging, and it's more challenging for some people than for others. You know, you have some people who are really naturally extroverted and outgoing, and don't struggle with making friends or having social interactions. For other people, it's much more difficult. Like I said, I think some of that was only made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic because they have less experience making those connections. I also think it can just be scary and it can be really awkward when you're 18 and you're in a new environment. And so you have the decision as an 18-year-old, well, I could stay in my dorm room and I could scroll TikTok and then I don't have to go meet anyone. Or I could go, downstairs to this event that's happening in a common room, but then it might be uncomfortable. It might be awkward. And so a lot of times people want to make the easy decision. They want to stay in their room where they feel comfortable, where they feel safe, instead of kind of pushing their boundaries and maybe going to an event where they don't know anyone. And I think that that's natural and it's understandable. And so it's not easy to make friends for a lot of people. And so I think that we have to consider that as we think about ways to support college students, is maybe creating more of those opportunities for students to get involved in communities so that they have that sense of belonging and of support that they may be left behind in high school.
In your class that you taught, what was the purpose? What were you trying to accomplish in the class that you developed and taught at Carolina?
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of background on how the class came to be and what it's all about. So in the fall of my second year at UNC, there were unfortunately 3 deaths by suicide on campus in just a really short matter of weeks. And so as a campus community, I think everyone was reeling. We were all upset. We all felt understandably kind of enraged by what was going on on our campus. And so as a PhD student at that time, I thought about, what can I do? I'm not an undergrad. I'm not a professor, but I do have a little bit of power and privilege that I can use here to hopefully do something to help better serve students and help their mental health. And so I started working with a few professors in the UNC School of Education, mostly Dr. Dorothy Espelage, who was an amazing professor in the School of Education. And we came up with this idea for a class that could help teach students some of these social skills, but also things like coping skills. So, how do you deal when you're really stressed out? How do you take care of your mental health and prioritize self care in a really overwhelming, stressful environment? And then also some concepts from things like positive psychology. So, how can you actually work on making yourself not just not depressed, but actually happier? So, those are some of the things that we talked to with our students. Our first semester, we had 30 students, and it was kind of a pilot. We said, okay, let's see how this goes. It went really well. We got phenomenal feedback from students. And so our second semester, we ran the class with 60 undergrads. We had everyone from freshmen to seniors, a really diverse group. And again, we had a really amazing experience where students were saying, I feel like I'm a part of a community, and I feel like you guys as instructors are actually listening to me and getting to know me. And we ran it for a third semester. And so now it's continuing to be run in the School of Education at UNC. So hopefully that it can serve more and more students. My ultimate goal is that every freshman at UNC gets to take a course like this, where they learn not only the skills you need to be successful in college, but the skills that you need to take care of yourself just as a person going through life. And so hopefully in the future, we'll be able to keep running the course and increase its reach to hopefully everyone at UNC.
Going back to the first part of your discussion of the class, when you say the questions about how to cope, how to do these things, what were some of the conclusions you reached? If you can tell me some of the things you actually told them what they should be doing, what should a person do?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So a few of them are really basic things, but I think that it's important that college students know it may be stressful. It's probably going to get stressful at times, but there are things that you can do to build up your own resilience and to buffer against that stress. So a lot of them are really basic stuff like getting enough sleep. This is really challenging for college students, looking at your sleep and saying, am I only getting 5 hours a night? Or can I increase that? Can I bump it up? Sleep plays a huge role in how we feel on a day to day basis. And it's hard in college because your schedule changes. There are social pressures. There are things that you want to go to. But that was something that we taught our students about, was just the importance of sleep. A second thing is exercise. Having a regular exercise routine can do wonders for someone's mental health. And it's a really simple intervention that students can do. So we talk about finding exercise that you enjoy, which could be going for a walk with your friends, or it can mean having access to the amazing free resources that you get in college, like a gym or workout classes and things like that. Other things that we talk about are your friendships and your social relationships, things like setting boundaries, but also being willing to make friends and to engage in conversations and to make sure that you're not socially isolating yourself when we are stressful. For a lot of us, when we get stressed out, the first thing that we tend to cut off are social relationships. So it's finals week. I'm super busy. I can't talk to my friends. I can't talk to my parents. I got to hunker down and just study. That's something we hear a lot from college students. But in reality, when you socially isolate yourself, a lot of times you're just making that stress and those feelings bigger and worse. We talk about gratitude and showing others gratitude and how that can benefit our mental health. And then lastly, one thing that we talk about that I think is oftentimes left out of conversations on mental health and wellness is we talk about spirituality, which can mean really different things for different people. So not just organized religion, but it could be something like mindfulness, like figuring out what makes you feel alive, what makes you feel connected to something bigger than yourself. So for me, this might be going for a hike or looking at art. For other people, it might be things like music. For other people, it is their faith community. Finding a sense of spirituality within your life can be really powerful. And I think it's also something that college students tend to frequently cut off when they are busy or when they are feeling overwhelmed.
What do you say to a college student who excelled in academics as a junior or senior, or excelled in sports, or was the big guy or the big girl on campus, and they go to a large public university and they're not number one any longer. How does a person adapt to that? I suspect that's more common than people know, but how does a person adapt to the change from high school to college, that transition?
It's hard. It's really difficult. And I think I personally can relate to that as someone who was a straight A student and worked really hard and got into college and then quickly realized, I'm not the smartest person here. I am not the most popular person here. I'm not the prettiest person here. And that can be really challenging when you go from being a big fish in a small pond to just being one of the fish in the ocean. That's kind of what it feels like when you
Mhm.
transition to college. And I think it's difficult, but I also want those students to know that what they're feeling is natural and that they're not alone in that feeling. And I think what's really important is for us as adults, so parents, teachers, professors, to voice our own experiences with struggle. So I find that parents frequently tell teenagers, you're going to have the best 4 years of your life. College is incredible. You're going to look back on it when you're my age and you're going to miss it so much. And all of that might be true. But at the same time, I think when we just tell students that, we do them a disservice because we don't tell them about the struggles that we had in college. We don't tell them about how, in my case, my first quiz at Duke, I failed. And so I think it's important to share those experiences with them to let them know that they are not alone in those feelings. And so whether you're an upperclassman who can share that experience with a freshman to make them feel a little bit more comfortable, whether you're a parent or even a friend, sharing your own vulnerability and your own struggle, I think can go a really long way to help a high schooler with that transition. So not just emphasizing all of the fun, amazing parts of college, which there are many, but also sharing your vulnerabilities, sharing the roadblocks that you encountered when you were a student, I think can be really helpful so that college students don't feel like they're the first person in the world to have this feeling because they're not. I think we've all been there and can relate to that experience and that feeling.
What role, when a parent drops their child off and they get in their car and drive home, how much time should pass before the parent reaches back out to the child? Can they let 24 hours go by or 48 hours, or is it quicker than that? Or how should they handle that separation?
I love that question. I think it's a great question. And I think that every parent and every child will have a different answer to that question. What I believe is most important is that ahead of time in the weeks before college, parents and kids can sit down and have that conversation because it's very important for each party to respect each other's boundaries, to figure out what those boundaries are, and then to plan from there. So some kids might be totally comfortable with calling their mom every single day or with having their mom call them every single day. Other students, they might want a little bit more distance at first, and that's okay. And so I think what's the most crucial is that you're having an open dialogue about what you would prefer. So it is totally fine for a mom to say, look, I would prefer it if you called me every 48 hours just so I know you're okay. If that's something that the mom needs and she voices that to the child, I think that can be really productive and helpful. It's also totally fine for that child to say, Mom, I respect that you want me to call you every 2 days. For me, I would really prefer to call you twice a week because that fits better with my schedule and that fits better with the boundaries that I need. It can feel weird to have some of these more open conversations, but I think establishing a really healthy, productive dialogue can be a great way to prevent some of the issues down the line where mom might be calling every day, multiple times a day, and the kid feels kind of violated, or they feel like they have to talk to their mom at all times. So I think it's going to be different for each kid. It's going to be different for every parent, but talk about it, have a discussion, figure out what works for you guys.
What is it like? What role does the dad play in all this? Is the dad sort of lost after the child goes away and he's now third wheel? What does the dad do? And how does the dad feel about this? And how should he do that?
Maybe. So I don't know. I'm speaking from my own experience as well as my conversations with all of the undergrads that I've taught. And it depends.
Is it easier to talk to your mom for most kids than to talk to their dad?
I will say that a lot of my students have expressed just how much they love talking to their moms on the phone. And so, for any moms listening, I do really believe that most college students genuinely enjoy talking to their parents on the phone, even for just a few minutes at a time. I think that there are things that they feel comfortable sharing with you that they might not feel comfortable sharing with other people. And I think that they enjoy hearing from you. It makes them feel connected, and it makes them feel still a part of that home community that they have. I think students probably want to hear from their dads too. Of course, it depends on each family's unique circumstances and their unique relationships. But I think it's important that dads stay involved if that's a role that they've traditionally had or not. I think college can be a great time for you to work on that relationship, to maintain contact. And so I think that dads can and should play a role for sure.
What should a parent say or do if a kid calls them up after sometime in the first week and says, "I want to come home. I don't like it. I want to take a year off. I want to find myself. I'm not ready for this. I want to come home." What should a parent say or do?
And I know that this does happen. I think it depends on the scenario and on the situation. So if there's ever any concern around safety, or you're genuinely concerned that your child might not be okay, um, of course, go get them, contact the local authorities if you need to. First and foremost, you want to prioritize their well-being. And so if you absolutely believe that it is important that you go get them, that you're making sure that they're safe, then by all means, do it. Do what you need to do in order to keep your child safe. However, what I would say is that there are some instances where your child might need a little push out the door. And so they might need to be encouraged to find some opportunities on campus, to do things like get involved in a club, to make new friends, even though it's uncomfortable and difficult. And I think that parents know their children really well. So as a parent, you might be able to determine, is this, something serious? Do I need to get more involved? Or I know Johnny, he's really struggled with making new friends. I think he just needs a little bit of support in making those friends. And so you might encourage him to go join the photography club, or go to the festival on campus that highlights all these different organizations, or join, your faith-based organization on campus. So they may just need some encouragement. They may just need to be listened to. I think sometimes parents jump into problem solving mode, and in actuality, their kid might just need some support. So they might just need to talk about it and hear the parent say, I'm sorry that you're going through that. It can be really difficult. And maybe that could be a time, like I mentioned earlier, for a parent to share some of their experiences with vulnerability in college. So, when I was in college, it was also really hard for me to make friends. And sharing with the child how they went about and did some of those things, that might be really helpful for the child to hear as well. So I think it depends on the situation, but I also do want to highlight that parents know their kids really well, and they can probably listen to their inner voice and say, I think, I know my kid really well. He just needs to go out and meet someone, or think about it and say, wow, I know my kid really well and he is really struggling. I think I need to get involved more fully.
Does your class, or do you did your class ever uh, consider the amount of free time that a student has at school? For example, they may have 3 classes in the day, but at different hours, the morning, the afternoon. But in between, they've got a couple of hours. Should a parent talk with a child about how to use that time as opposed to goofing off or playing or doing things that might affect their grades in a bad way if they don't do that?
So I've heard from most of my students that they're actually too busy. They are overbooked. And I think that goes back to the UNC culture of overachieving. So many of them are a part of numerous campus organizations. They're taking 5 classes. Some of them play club sports or are athletes. They have a lot going on and they're very involved on campus, the vast majority of my students. Also, some of them are what we call non-traditional students. They're working full-time jobs on top of being students. They're commuting. Some of them take the bus from faraway places in order to go to UNC. So I think we have to acknowledge that a lot of college students are super, super busy. I will say there are some students, sometimes second semester seniors or students who, for whatever reason, have a lighter course load that semester, who do find themselves in the situation of saying, I have a few hours of free time. What can I do with my time? And I do think that that's a skill that students can begin building in high school. They can talk about with their parents how to manage their time. Time management is a really difficult skill. And I have heard from some students that they are happier when they are busy and more involved in more activities. And so I think it's up to the individual. I think free time can be really beautiful. It can be a time where you explore campus or find a new hobby or, find new friends. But of course, it can also be destructive. And so it depends on the person, I would say. But I do think that that is something, if a parent notices, they could say, hey, I noticed, on Mondays, you have a huge time block. What are you doing in that time? Are you using it to get homework done? Are you doing a cool new hobby? Because that's great. Or, are you not using that time effectively? And we could talk about ways for you to use that time more wisely. So if that's coming up, if it's something that your child is mentioning, I think it's absolutely appropriate to gently suggest some helpful time management strategies for them. Maybe again, you could suggest some things that have worked for you in the past. I think it's important to approach that conversation from a really non-judgmental place. So if they are saying, I have a lot of free time, but I am using it to be productive or to do yoga or to paint or to figure out what I like, um, that's cool. They're in college. They should be kind of exploring their identity and exploring some of these other things. So I think it's important for the parent to not approach the conversation as, hey, why are you not working 24/7? But I think just coming at it from a place of, how are you feeling about your time usage? Are you feeling good about the way that you're spending your days? I think a productive conversation could definitely happen between a parent and a child around how their day is going.
What do you think is the essence of making a college student happy? And how important is it for a college student to be happy while they're there? Is that possible to be happy as a college student with all the pressures that one has?
I think so. And I think we have to think about it holistically. I think happiness to me in a college student is someone who feels healthy, who is taking care of their sleep, who's exercising, who has strong social relationships and feels good about their social presence on campus, someone who is engaged in their day-to-day life. I think it's absolutely possible to have happy and healthy college students. It takes work. And I think that it's important to tell students that it's not magic. You can't go to one therapy session and not do any work and suddenly feel happy. It takes input. You have to be willing to put in some of that work, to work on yourself in order to get there. I don't think that there's a magic happiness pill or a silver bullet that could suddenly make college students happy. But I do think that there are things that college students can do to help buffer against that stress that they are experiencing and to help them take better care of themselves so that they do feel happier ultimately.
What do you think causes a college student to spiral into, say, a sense of depression while they're there? Is that external? Is that internal? Or what do you think? And if they are that way, what should they do? They may not know that they're depressed. And
Mm-hmm.
if they are depressed, they may resist being called depressed. But if a person is spiraling down and not feeling good about themselves, what should he or she do?
Yeah, so it's challenging. I think it can be caused for many different reasons. So coming to college with some of those feelings of inadequacy, feelings of self-esteem issues, and then let's say you fail a test or you don't get invited to the party that you wanted to go to. And then on top of that, um, your parent loses their job or you have a pet die. There are just all of these things that can happen in a row, some external, some internal, that can cause a person to sink deeper into depression. Um, some things that people might want to pay attention to if they're wondering if they are depressed is not feeling any joy in activities that used to bring them joy, feeling really fatigued, really sluggish. And I think if a college student finds themselves in that scenario where they know something is not right, where they don't feel like themselves, where they know that that spark is gone, they should absolutely seek help. And that is something that I want to emphasize. Every parent, every person, we should be normalizing help seeking. So it is absolutely okay to ask for help when you need it. And that is true across all facets of life, but it is particularly true with your mental health. So if you are struggling in college, you should absolutely talk to someone. That can be sharing your concerns with a professor. It can mean talking to your advisor. It can mean going to the counseling and psychological services on campus. It could even mean opening up to a friend and saying, I really am not doing well right now. Can you please help connect me to the services that I need? That could be a conversation that a person has with their parent. What I really hope that students understand, and another thing that we try and teach in my class, is that when you are struggling, go get help. Because when you feel in that pit of despair, it can be really difficult to climb out on your own. It can also feel really hard to even ask anyone for help. But if you are there, asking for help is the best way to ensure that you get the resources that you need. So if you are feeling like you may be depressed, reach out to someone you trust, reach out to your parents, ask for help in getting the services that you need, and people will absolutely help you. I think in the past, there's been so much stigma around mental health and around help seeking. One thing that I find incredible about this new generation of students is that some of that stigma is being broken down. They are much more comfortable talking about mental health. And so I want all students to know that it is okay to ask for help when you need it.
You talked about the different feelings that kids can have when their parents say to them, this is going to be the best 4 years of your life. Let me ask you a tough question. You don't know this is coming. Think years from now when you have a child and is going to college If you were sitting down to tell that child, boy or girl, what would you want to say to them?
I think I would tell them that college is going to be exciting. It's going to be a time of exploration, a time of growth, and it will ultimately impact the rest of your life. But it is not the rest of your life. It is 4 years. I also would want to share with them that there will be challenges. It will be hard. You will not be the smartest person in the room. And so you might have to work much harder than you've ever worked in your life. You also might feel uncomfortable at times, and that is okay because you are growing. And the way that we grow is through being a little bit uncomfortable. I also would want to have very real conversations with them about alcohol, about drug use, about social pressures on campus, because those are very real pressures that a lot of times parents shy away from talking about. And the culture of college involves a lot of substances. And that's something I think that we all could be more upfront with when we're discussing the transition to college with students. You will feel peer pressure at times. Let's make a plan for how you're going to address these things as you move to college. So those are just a few of the things I would say, but there's probably much, much more.
That was a tough question. That's a good answer. That's a tough question if you're not expecting that. What do you think are we past this period of time in colleges? I know in the Triangle and in North Carolina, I suppose other places as well, where the issue of suicide for college students is prevalent. Is it still a concern on college campuses today? Or do you think it's gone away a little bit? Or you have to be ever vigilant?
I think it's absolutely a concern, and it's something that we should all be aware of. It's a concern for not just colleges across the country, but for everyone across the country. And it's something I think we all need to grow more comfortable talking about, which is hard. It can be awkward and scary to have conversations about suicide, but it's something that I think we all need to do. And so if you are a parent or even a friend and you are worried about one of your friends or your child, it is absolutely okay and can be life-saving to ask them, are you thinking about suicide? Or have you made a plan to kill yourself? And that's really scary to say those words to someone that you love, but asking that question up front directly could potentially save their lives. There's a common misconception that talking about suicide will increase the number of people who commit suicide. That is not true. So we know from the research that it's actually better to ask someone up front in case we can prevent a death by suicide. So it's scary to talk about. It's difficult to talk about, but I think that we all have a responsibility to have those difficult conversations when we love and care about someone and want to make sure that they're safe. And it's a concern at colleges. It's a concern at high schools. It's just a reality of the world that we live in. People are struggling, and I'm glad that I think the media, public perception, conversation has shifted to being more open to talk about mental health. But I think it's still something in all of our personal lives we can grow more comfortable talking about to help reduce the stigma around mental illness and around suicidality.
At college graduation, everybody dresses up. The parents come, you have your caps and gowns, they play a lot of music and that sort of thing. And somebody makes a speech that you listen to or maybe can't remember. But what do you think makes a successful college experience? What would you say after 4 years there has made it successful? For example, you mentioned that your first test or first quiz at Duke did not go as well as you might have hoped, but obviously some later on went well. how would you say you would go from the depths of, oh my God, what have I done, to it 4 years later, you can smile and be happy that you were successful? What does a successful college career look like?
For me, as I mentioned, it was establishing a growth mindset. So knowing I failed this quiz, but I can work harder and do better next time. And that's a skill that I still apply in my life today. I know that if I fail at something, I can work to get better. I might not be able to do something yet, but I will be able to do something if I put my mind to it and I work hard. So that might be one of my takeaways from college. Other people might learn different lessons, and I think that's okay. For me, what I tell my students in my class is that if you leave this class and you know that one adult on campus cares about you, I will consider this class a success. And so I think how we define success looks different for every person, how we define a successful college experience. When I think about it, and this is just my personal opinion, it's having students learn and grow and hopefully work towards being their best selves. For some people, college might be the best 4 years of their lives. For other people, it might not be, and that's okay too. It might set them up to go have the best 4 years of their lives later down the road. And I think that that's perfectly great. I think that that's awesome. College should give us the skills and the competencies that we need to progress, hopefully, throughout the rest of our lives. But it's not the end all be all. And so I think success can be different for each person depending on what they want out of their college experience.
As you're teaching or studying right now to get your doctorate, what do you hope? What do you want to do after you get your doctorate? Do you want to set up a private practice? Do you want to be a professor and a combination? Do all of the above, or do you yet know what you really want to do, where you want to go?
Yeah, I'd ideally like to do some combination. I see myself long term having my own private practice, but I would also love continuing to teach at the university level and also consulting with universities on making them more um, welcoming, more cohesive, better environments for mental health at large. So how can we improve the mental health of the university as a whole? How can we offer workshops on mental health to students to help improve, their coping skills or whatever it may be? So I'd really like to work on projects that improve mental health at scale. That's one of my long-term goals and passions.
Well, you've been to both Duke and UNC, and both wonderful schools. How do they rank to you, not necessarily against each other, but in general about caring for the students at their schools and preparing them for a good future and taking care of their mental health? How do they do that? How do they rank in your mind doing that?
Mm-hmm. It's difficult to provide a ranking. I think both Duke and UNC have extremely high achieving, perfectionistic students. And so there is a culture of competition, which can be really hard on young people's mental health. And so I will say that I think Duke and UNC have similar struggles in that they are in anxiety inducing environments. I think that they have both taken some really positive steps in the right direction to providing adequate mental health services for their students. It's still not enough. So both Duke and UNC have campus counseling centers. Oftentimes those counseling centers are overwhelmed with the number of students who need services. They also both have done some really innovative stuff, which is exciting. So at UNC, I believe hundreds of professors have gotten mental health first aid training. And that to me speaks volumes about the UNC professors. I think that that is absolutely wonderful and something that all universities should do. Duke has also done some really innovative stuff involving peer counseling. They have a new wellness center. So both universities are really making positive steps in the right direction. I still think that there's more work to be done, both for these schools, other schools in North Carolina, and schools across the country. I think that we're just kind of now grappling with college student mental health as a really big, wicked problem and trying to find solutions. So it's very exciting to see some stuff that other universities have implemented. I think that in the Triangle, we are trying, but I think that there's still a lot of work to be done.
Finally, are you happy that you have decided to go into the field of psychology? Do you enjoy it? Is it something you love?
Yes, absolutely. I love my work. I love getting to interact with the incredible students and kids that I get to work with every day. I consider it a huge privilege that I get to teach them, work with them. I really love my work. It can be very challenging. I will be honest that it's a draining profession. And so I excited about the next few years in my field. I'm very excited about this next generation coming up that is really passionate and open about mental health and reducing stigma. Yeah, I would say I'm very lucky to get to do what I do.
I just want to thank you for doing this today. I think what we have talked about, or what you have talked about, I just sort of sat here and listened, but what you have talked about is just going to make a big difference to a lot of people. So I just want to thank you for doing this. It's been great talking to you.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And that will end it. Let me just end with saying to everyone else, I hope you enjoyed this particular podcast with Anne. And if you like it, and I hope you do, please click the follow button.